Welcome, dear listener, to the inaugural episode of Jeremiad podcast. My name is Tom. I am 27 years old. I am from Shropshire, and I'm currently doing an MA in journalism at the University of Sheffield.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. Hello, dear listeners. I am the other half of Jeremiad because one never rants alone. Do not forget. My name is not Tom. My name is Andy. I am of the same age. We are both living right on the edge of reaching the 27 club. I don't think people give enough credence to that. But anyway, I'll stay on track. I also hail from Shropshire. What are the chances? Isn't that wild that two of us would end up on a podcast together that are of the same age and hail from the same county? Incredible. I work a job that I'm going to say as little about as possible.
Thank you.
And there we go. Yes, and thank you as well, Tom. I think you inspired me there. So, Jeremiad, you mentioned that word, and that seems to be the name of this podcast. But tell me, Tom, what is that? What do you mean?
That's an excellent point. For anyone who might not know what a Jeremiad is, I've got two definitions here. I've got one I'll go with the shorter one. This is the basic Google definition, which defines a Jeremiad as a long, mournful complaint or lamentation, a list of woes. There's a slightly longer one, which I will also read out. That is a long literary work, usually in prose, but sometimes in verse, in which the author bitterly laments the state of society and its morals in a serious tone of sustained invective, and always contains a prophecy of society's imminent downfall. I think both of those really just encapsulate quite perfectly what this is all about.
Absolutely. They are music to my ears, both of those definitions. You just feel that warm, fuzzy glow, don't you? For me, it's really the bitter lament. And I think that's clever because obviously it's a bitter lament in the way a lemon is bitter, but it could also be heard as a bit of lament. So maybe, right, you're getting ready for work in the morning, you didn't have full time for a rant of certain gravitas that some nonsense in this world you feel deserved. You've just got to slap your toast with a bit of lament to get you through.
Micro-lamenting, it's just sort of like
yes,
having a little lament,
just
not too much at once, just enough to keep you going.
That's it, a nice little bite-size ramble.
There's nothing wrong with that. And there's also nothing wrong with a full-blown scroll of lament that you've written out on a nice piece of parchment, as they would have done back in the day. So I just, as a keen historian, I did my undergrad in history, so I'm going to take the reins on this one. I'm just going to give the listener just a bit of a history on the Jeremiad, where it comes from, how it came to existence. So it actually comes from his namesake Jeremiah, who lived roughly between 650 and 570 BC. You'll find him dotted throughout the Old Testament. He was a prophet of sorts. He was a man who saw through the bullshit, really. He lived in Jerusalem. Jerusalem had gone astray, and God called Jeremiah to prophecy. So he was appointed by God to kind of reveal the sins of the people and the punishment that was to come. I think God in the Old Testament was pretty brutal. He dealt out punishment, floods, plagues, death, like it's no one's business. So Jeremiah was a kind of emissary of God. In the same way God spoke to Moses to reveal the Ten Commandments, he spoke to Jeremiah to just really tell it how it is, effectively. But of course, if you go around prophesizing the downfall of society, you're going to make enemies. He had various plots to kill him. The Babylonians threw him into a cistern, from which he nearly died, but he kept on going. So it's in the book. There's a book in the Bible, the Book of Lamentations. He heavily features in that. So that was Jeremiah really himself. Sort of skip forward 2,000 years or so to the Puritans of New England. They really revived the Jeremiad quite interestingly. So obviously there was this idea that the colonies would be this so-called city upon a hill, this kind of virtuous, pure Christian civilization. It's almost like a Christian utopia that they were aiming for. But of course they never got there. various bad harvests, wars with the natives, were all interpreted as the wrath of God. And basically, the Puritans felt that they lacked morals in the new colonies. And so they took to writing a lot of Jeremiads. I'm going to read a little excerpt from a sermon from Jonathan Edwards, who was a particular vocal critic of society. This is a great one. The old serpent is gaping for them. Hell opens his mouth wide to receive them, and if God should permit it, they would be hastily swallowed up and lost. And that is Jonathan Edwards, sort of in his sermons, sinners in the hands of an angry God.
I mean, it takes you right there, doesn't it? Immediately, you can smell the disappointment of the Puritan. The issues they would have had, and I think there's so many similarities with what we're facing these days. The quest for righteousness that always seems forlorn, and of course, there's no shortage of of things to moan about in this society, things to critique, as our brothers many moons ago surely did.
Of course, interestingly as well, that Jeremiah was, saying that Jerusalem had gone astray, and recent events in Israel just go to show, things just don't change. And that's one thing I definitely learned studying history, was that people have always been the same. They've always been petty. They've always been silly and hypocrites. It's interesting that, we kind of think that we're so different, so much better, almost superior to our ancestors. Yeah, really, we're no better. I mean, Jerusalem still is a bit of a, I don't want to say hellhole, but yeah, it's got its problems, and it has done for thousands of years.
But I think the one biggest difference, though, and I'm surprised that this didn't have more of a positive effect on affecting peace, is that what they didn't benefit from back in those days, pon yonder, not Pondy Replay, but pon yonder, was they didn't have the beautiful hindsight of 2008's Kingdom of Heaven, featuring Orlando Bloom in a star-stealing role as a reluctant British man who crusades for some reason or other. He gets roped into it. He didn't really want to, but you don't really believe that. And he sorts them out. And that's that.
It's a good film. Ridley Scott. You need to watch the director's cut, I think. It's one of those where the theatrical cut just doesn't really do it justice. Yeah, it's Orlando Bloom. I forget the name of the actress now, but there's my history's going now. Is it Baldwin the Fourth, the Leper King? When he takes the mask off.
There is a leper involved. I remember that.
His leper face. That's a great scene. Good film. Would recommend to anyone listening. But that's not what we're here. We're not here for film recommendations.
But if anyone does want to take homework from this episode, I would say that can be your homework. Just oh no, I'm sorry. Back on track.
Yeah, back on track. So that's basically Jeremiad in a nutshell, and we sort of want to continue that tradition that was started many moons ago by our ancestors. And so, in the sort of spirit of that, I guess we'll sort of move on to really the point in which we had that Jeremiad moment, that kind of thing, that event, that phenomena that really sort of struck us the same way that Jeremiah was struck to go on about his rant. So I'll open the floor to you, Andy, on this one. What was your Jeremiad moment?
Yeah, well, thank you. Do you know, this did take me a bit of thinking, and I have a bit of a long-winded answer as to why it took me a bit of thinking. I'm going to take you back, Tom. I'm going to take you back 11 years, right? The first prominent Jeremiad moment that I really remember or thought was that impactful upon myself centered around the 2012 Olympics. Now, we were both young nippers back in the day. We were at our last year of secondary school. And again, funnily enough, like at the start, could you believe the odds? We were actually in the same school.
Yeah.
Even in some of the same classes. It's just off the scale. Like, what are the chances of that? I don't know. Anyway, the 2012 Olympics, we probably believed at the time we were becoming sentient, becoming creatures of awareness, realizing the way the waves fall in this sea around us. Around that time, around 2011, there was obviously a lot of excitement, talk, intrigue blowing all over the place around the Olympics coming. What a momentous event, how fantastic for the country, God save the Queen, all of that jazz. And I remember it being a slow and gradual cog turn of looking at some of the things that were being said and done about the Olympics. And I think in particular, one thing that struck a chord was when you kind of look at how much resources were being put into that, when the state of the country then, I mean, this is sort of prime time David Cameron era. And I'm not trying to get too political on the first episode right away, because that would be like selling my character straight away. It'd be like giving you a quid for 50p, really. And I'm not going to do that because I'm a man of sense sometimes. The Olympic Games, it's big deal. They're spending a lot of money on it when there's a lot of other things about the state of the country. I think because it's that time when you're nearly able to vote, and you're probably taking a bit more of an active interest in the ins and outs of that. What does it actually mean? Who should I actually vote for, if so? And some of the headlines, and they're talking about there's going to be this new stadium built and that done. And then you also seen headlines about homelessness on the streets, like how some vulnerable people were being treated or more likely not being treated in the country. And just a sense of really realizing, oh my gosh, wow, the priorities of the departments where things should be very right, and as you've always kind of been taught growing up, are actually just completely off. And it culminated in a moment where, as is tradition, the Olympic torch goes on a tour or a procession, a relay, a baton relay, they call it, because I have the technical term, because obviously I have relative experience that I'm sure at some point in a future episode I will pull on to talk a lot about Birmingham 2022. But for now, and they just happened to be bringing that torch through our lovely little hometown of Oswestry the one day. And I always remember everyone else is really excited. They're cheering this person on. It's some, I can't remember who it was. Anyway, yeah, torches coming through. Picture the scene. One of the main streets in our town. It's a very small rural town bordering Wales. There's, it's kind of the epicenter of nothingness. People lining the road, the torches coming through. Me and Thomas stood there with a banner that we'd put together that was protesting the whole thing. I cannot remember specifically what the banner actually said. I know that it was making a point about how much money had been spent on the Olympics and how insanely ridiculous that was, but I can't remember for the life of me what it actually said. I might still have that at home somewhere. I would liken that, I would say it was an eye-opening moment. Not the specific moment, but the kind of whole culmination of warming up to the games and then that day protesting. I don't really think that people gave us much jip. I remember, you did get a couple funny looks and people being a bit like, what are they getting at? And I think it was maybe as much that, the sort of reaction of the populace, that most people were just, oh yay, torch, happy, wow, magical fire run through our village, let's clap, amazing. Yeah, it's a first-hand introduction to the word scandal that I think for me is often linked to things that imbue me to feel more Jeremiad, to put myself in his shoes. And I think the issue is, as I've said, why I struggled to pinpoint specific moments that I really think like, oh yeah, that was a Jeremiad moment, is because that word scandal, how often do we encounter that? Multiple times a day these days. You just become a bit desensitized to it in life, really. It's kind of sad, isn't it? But pinpointing a moment for me is a bit like trying to pick a drop of water out of the sea. Even today, right? So I know I said I've got a recent occurrence of an example to bring you, but this is a bit of lament as opposed to a bitter lament that will come later. So there's a story breaking today. I don't know if you've seen it. The guy's actually come forward and announced who he is now, but the headline earlier was enough. It was literally Tory MP, so a Conservative Member of Parliament, the active government in control of this country, arrested on suspicion of rape and possession of drugs. It's fantastic, and it's just 10 a penny, isn't it? I know. But that's an example, not so much on the political aspect, but this person is supposed to be a beacon bearer. That is probably the biggest and most clear Jeremiad moment I can pinpoint right now. And what about yourself, Tom?
Well, I just want to say thank you for sharing that. I'm actually just reading through. I'm just having a look. Yeah, Crispin Blunt. What a name.
Yeah, great name.
It's such a Tory name.
Disgrace to the name, really. You meet a guy, or you got an email come through, and it's from Crispin Blunt, and you think, all right, hold on a minute. I need to treat this email seriously. Not anymore, you don't.
Ridiculous. It also says here at the end of the article, a separate Conservative MP in his 50s was arrested on suspicion of rape in May 2022. The MP is currently on bail until mid-February 2024. on allegations of sexual assault, abuse of position of trust, and misconduct in a public office. This is just fuel for the fire, isn't it? This is just like I don't want any spoilers for future episodes, but this is gold. Interestingly, what you said there about trying to pick a sort of pinch of salt out the sea, very much the same thing for me. When I kind of flicked back, when I sort of searched through the corridors of my mind for the one moment, I actually really struggled. I know it's there, and I know there is sort of it, but then for me, it's more like this kind of stalagmite of things that has grown, this sort of slow layering. And I'm just going to throw out a few examples, really. I mean, one, I remember quite clearly being pretty disgusted at the Pogmoji. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. Do you know what? I do remember that. To me, that was probably just light relief. Come on, elaborate.
There was something quite sinister about the Pogmoji. I mean, like, for a long time now, footballers have been turned into these kind of commercial entities. But there was just something so sinister about the Pogmoji. It just felt horrible. I was like, it's just so dumb. This isn't really what football's about. And it just kind of repulsed me a little bit. Another one was the gradual rise of the selfie stick. I want to say that sort of circa around 2014. I can't quite remember when it became socially acceptable to use them, but they always struck me as a terrible device. They just sort of feed into the growing vanity of people who engage in such things. Funnily enough, when I was living, I was living on the Isle of Skye for a bit. Someone actually died taking a selfie. It's a location called the Fairy Pools. It's a real tourist hotspot. It's like these beautiful sort of glacial pools that run down this like mountainside, and there's like the mountains in the background. Someone was taking a selfie, fell into one of the pools, hit their head, and drowned. That was a sort of one for me. Another one, similar kind of thing, is the rise of drones and the use of people using drones.
Okay, yeah.
I've had several occasions where I'm somewhere like that should be nice and quiet, somewhere where I can just enjoy a bit of nature, a bit of peace, and there's some selfish bastard there with a drone, and it's buzzing around, and you're like, I just want to. I just want to take this in. I want to have this moment. I just want to enjoy the sound of like the waves lapping on the shore, or the sound of the leaves blowing in the wind. And there's just someone there disrupting the peace with a goddamn drone. The most recent one actually. I can't remember the name of the loch now. There's a certain loch in Scotland. It's near the Glenfinnan Viaduct, and yeah, there was just someone there with a drone. I'm just like, it's just disturbs my peace. They shouldn't be allowed. I just think for personal use they should be gone. What else have I written here? There was a Waitrose advert. It was a Christmas. It wasn't the advert itself. See, I had no problem with the advert. It was a Christmas advert, and Waitrose. Not that I shop there really, but they wanted to pay homage to like the farmers, right? Christmas wouldn't be anything without we need the people to grow the sprouts and to rear the turkeys and grow the potatoes, and that was the point. It was like, let's not forget where our Christmas dinner comes from. And there was a scene in the advert where there's two farmers comparing their tans. They pull their shirt sleeves up and they're like seeing which one's got the better tan. And I don't know if you've come across many farmers, but in general they're pretty tanned because they spend most of their time outside. But the advert in the end got pulled because of complaints from some kind of like skin cancer group. They were saying it was insensitive to like people who have skin cancer, because like obviously if you that's how you get skin cancer, is obviously like tanning too much. And I was like, what?
That's amazing. So in that circumstance, you were offended by someone's offence.
Exactly. It's just like, just get over it. There's always going to be things that happen that remind you of things you'd rather not think about, right? I mean, that's literally happens to me all the time. Like, and I don't complain about it to the actual thing or institution. I just deal with it.
In a way, are they not, with their complaint there, are they not doing what we're trying to do right here?
No, there's a difference, you see, because they actually
They
snitched, basically. They went to Waitrose. You know, the ad got pulled in the end. I remember reading the news story about it. And for me, it just sort of was very representative of how careful you have to be now, how cautious you have to be in society. There's always someone's always going to be offended by something, but does that mean it shouldn't be allowed?
I think that's a very big point, and it's actually something when I was enjoying a little bit of prep and research prior to the show, there was something I read. There was a ridiculous website. Actually, I'll have to send you this. It was a ridiculous website I stumbled upon. It was like a men's health website, masculinity, wellness. It's not just about, here's a cool recipe or buy this protein. We're also trying to put a bit of philosophy on there as well. And they've got a little section where they were talking about some great Jeremiads from days gone by, and how obviously like the link between testosterone and venting, and it was just a really simple sentence. And they said at one point, after, like, the examples were really poor, but this one line, it just said, Jeremiads are supposed to challenge beliefs and pose questions. If it offends you, it's done something right. And I found that quite interesting, and I thought, yeah, that should be, and it's there's probably a bit of a link there, isn't there? Because as you were charting the historical breakdown and context of the term, really over the years, it's something that's died out quite a lot. I mean, the concept of people denouncing things, ails of society, still is prevalent, but it's been very much watered down and digitized into a tweet these days. And that, on the other hand, like you're saying, everyone is sort of offended at everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jeremiah, himself, obviously, as I said, he made some enemies. People weren't happy with what he was saying. He got thrown into a cistern. Obviously, we're not as violent as a society, I would think, these days. So instead of throwing people into a cistern, we complain to Ofcom to get adverts taken down to protect I don't know what percentage of the population is affected by skin cancer. I can't imagine it's huge. I think, yeah, we probably should offend someone at least at some point. And I'm offended by things, and so are you, and that's why we're here. But I never take it personally.
But is that not, and I don't mean to be a bastard by prodding this,
Please do.
But if you are offended by something, surely you literally have taken it personally. Do you know what I mean? Is that not what offence is? Because if it's not offended you, you don't care about it, do you? But if something has offended you, then surely.
I know what you mean. I guess what I meant really was more like, I don't feel like it's an attack on me as an individual.
Okay.
Which is what I think some people do find. I think, like, a lot of people, when they get offended by things, they kind of have this idea that it's all about me. It's like, they're really getting at me.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't really see them like attacking me as an individual. Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way it's personal to me because that's what offends me, but it's not directed at me, and I realize that, and that's why I can brush these things off, but I still do get annoyed by them. It's a kind of, it's a weird one. I'm not the kind of person who's just going to go on like Twitter and rant about it.
I think it's an important distinction to have, though, isn't it? If you're going to let something ruin your day or bring you that much like discomfort, harm, disharmony, because the thing is as well, I suppose, like you're saying, obviously we've made the point that this kind of process is to be cathartic, and it's something that previously, when we have told stories of the state of the world or things that have happened, it is cathartic to share it. Whereas I think people get themselves so offended and it becomes almost like a delusion.
I think it also is kind of like this, some people plays into the sort of need to always be like a victim. But I think what we're doing here is we're resurrecting and continuing that tradition of the Jeremiad, bitterly lamenting the state of society. What we're here for is just a good old rant, get some stuff off our chests, because it feels good.
Yeah.
And I think it's good for people to listen to. Yeah, it's like, hopefully you feel the same way about things, and you can have a good think about your Jeremiad as well, and what's really your moment where you just kind of sort of looked at society, shook your head in disappointment, and felt exasperated.
When did you think, God, is this really the world we live in? And that's it. Just come and set in with a cup of tea and blow some steam off with Jeremiad.
Exactly.
forgot to kind of mention when you said about you reeled off some excellent ones, really, and I did share the same disgust at those events. The selfie stick, that was everywhere. And to be fair, you don't really see them that much now. You do still see some, but for the most part, I think people have moved on. People's arms have grown. A great reference. Thank you for that.
I had a lot more as well. I really did, but I thought, well, I can't do them all, so I just sort of picked out the choice ones. What I've written down here is just a really big list, a list of woes, if you will.
Yeah, literally. Excellent. And was it cathartic for you to put this list together, or was it troubling to revisit previous trauma?
Oof, God, yeah. I mean, it was a bit, it was a bit triggering. Yeah. One of them I wrote down was when I was rejected by this like lighting company for a job as like a copywriter, and I read like through their website, and their website was littered with grammatical errors. Whoever was the copywriter had no idea how to use an apostrophe, and there I am, a young graduate, ready. I'm like, maybe they got annoyed because I pointed out on my application. I said, look, your website needs some editing, but I'll happily do that. And I got rejected, and I was like, how is someone in this job who can't use an apostrophe? And then there's me.
It'll be a different reason. It will be a different reason.
There's me.
It's never as clear cut as you think. It's a classic case of bullshit. I had a similar experience one time. I'd applied for a job as a copywriter. I had 2 interviews as part of the process. I had to do a task for them. It was basically 3 different copywriting exercises that totaled like probably about 2,000 words. Sent that off to them. They came back to me in the end and they said, we think you'd be a good candidate and you'd be good at that job, but actually we need a manager, not a copywriter. And it's like, well, what? You've advertised for the company. What do you mean? And again, it's one of these moments where I'm like, there's literally nothing that you can do. You've been on the end of that complete idiocy, but it's clearly a them thing. They've clearly got something internally.
Funny enough, I mean, it happens. I've been rejected for some pretty low level jobs, and it kind of hurts. I walked past the ferry lighting company, not too recently. Yeah, it did cross my mind to like get a brick and just sort of launch it through the window, but I thought, you know what, I'll wait for the podcast, then I can get it off. I would never condone or endorse violence, but I guess it's that kind of little voice of chaos that we all have in our mind. Yeah. that little spark of vengeance that was just sort of, twitching a bit, and I was like, oof, there they are, the bastards.
Yeah. You know what you should do instead? Turn off their electricity somehow.
Cut the mains. Yeah.
Not going to light anything up then, are they? We'll bring an update on this next time.
Yeah, and I'll open a rival candle shop next door. Traditional lighting.
Excellent.
Then they'll be all flocking to me.
Could you imagine? That's the kind of thing that if one day this podcast began to earn money and we got rich, I would genuinely suggest that's exactly what we do. Is we just punk people and businesses that have done us wrong. Buy them out, fake customers, all of that. So I mentioned earlier that I've got a recent occurrence. It's a little bit of the Matrix moving in modern daylight, I think, and I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on this, Tom. There's this fascinating little Taylor Swift tidbit / mercurial operation. It depends on how you read it. And it's just fantastic because it's just such nonsense. Like, celebrity drama is incredible. She's a very big pop star, and as with the lot of them, the romance is intensely scrutinized. For some reason, it is deemed by the media that the public have a pressing desire to know every bloody heartbeat. She always seems to just be in and out of relationships, and then quite famously, the majority of her lyrics stem from dealing with these heartbreaks, these flings, these sometimes seemingly high school boyfriend-girlfriend dramas. She has recently gone to, I think there's been a third now, but at the time of writing, she's been to 2 NFL matches recently. She's been in attendance watching the Kansas Chiefs. They've got a player called Travis Kelce. And I think that he was a decent player for them before it, but he was no global superstar, face of the sport, anything like that. And apparently out of nowhere, she's rumoured to be dating him. this buzz starts generating. She's got a ridiculous fan base, and they are hungry for any information, gossip they can get. They gargle up all these rumours, and there becomes a really intense focus on what's going on. So much so that I believe after just attending the one game, sales of his jersey went up 400%. He gained 300,000 more followers on social media. So that was a home game at the Kansas City Chiefs. The next game, they're playing away at the New York Jets. Taylor's there again. And I think because it's people are a bit like, okay, she can go one time to a game and it could be anything, but she's there again. That probably means something. Apparently, that game had 24 million more viewers than previous matches. And loads of people are talking about, the Taylor Swift economy, as they're calling it. This is just the effect of her going to a couple of games. Everyone's talking about the Chiefs. I saw something on Twitter. It was completely conspiratorial, but looking to kind of debunk or effectively explain why. Apparently, it's not as innocent as it seems. This theory goes on to state that she's apparently notorious for travelling in a private jet.
She wants to travel, swiftly.
Hey, there you go. It's very bad PR, isn't it? Especially this day and age. They're probably all trying to come out talking about doing carbon neutral gigs, or at least if they're not actively trying to sell themselves through a green lens, they're not actively admitting, I burnt this amount of fossil fuels. Apparently in 2022, her jet emitted just shy of 83,000 tons of carbon. I ain't no scientist, but it's quite a big number. It's just like she flies everywhere all the time, right? So previously, if people would have searched Taylor Swift jets, these are the stories they would have got. But now, as a result of her attending these matches and the buzz, if you search Taylor Swift jets, all that's coming up is her at the Jets game. And it's like, oh my God, that whole thing was just a PR masterclass. The romance ain't nothing. She doesn't give a shit about NFL or these sports games. The only reason that they've done it is, I don't know, whoever it is in a team that's orchestrated that, but that's the kind of move that people would say, God, he deserves a raise. How many ways you can split that? The worst thing is, she'll probably travel by jet to get to that game in which she's attending so she can greenwash her image. Amazing. It did just make me stop and shake my head. I was lost for a speech for a minute or two. I genuinely did have that naive pang of, surely not.
I mean, I guess time will tell, won't it? If they stay together or not, or if they break off, which is probably, given Taylor Swift's previous record, it's quite likely. Now, I'm no Swiftie, but I'm trying to think of who she has. Did she date Harry Styles, or have I made that up?
I don't know if she dated Harry Styles. I do know that she dated Jake Gyllenhaal.
Jake Gyllenhaal, good actor. She also dated someone else called Taylor, I'm pretty sure. Is it Taylor Lautner is his name?
Oh,
from Twilight, yeah. Also from Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
Oh, sorry, of course, yeah.
Cheaper by the dozen too, which is a rare case of the sequel being superior to the original. Yeah, so I imagine, sort of given her previous engagements, you'd imagine this one won't last long. But that's big if true. Right, that's wild. That she'd be willing to cover up. And ultimately, if it is true, what about the NFL player? What about Kels? He's just been. He might be making money out of this because his shirt sales are up, I'd imagine, and he's getting more Twitter followers or whatever. What if he gets a broken heart along the way? She's toying with humans here, human emotions.
A top-level NFL athlete, he probably knows the game, right? And if I was to look at it that way and bet that's how it's going to go, that it is more of a sham, it's just kind of reputation, isn't it? Pardon the pun, she's got an album called Reputation. The fact that we have even just spoken about this dude, I think the anomaly here would be that it actually proves to be a long-lasting relationship, because typically with Taylor, it's been sort of short flings and bursts. That then actually would work with the theory anyway, because that would be like standard Taylor procedure. Maybe she's at like 2 or 3 more games and then it's sort of done with. But that way, you can't prove or disprove it either way, because is it just coincidence that she went to that game and it's covered all these stories and like didn't work out between them anyway? Or is it that this is like a manipulation and he's just a bit of a pawn.
That's it's a good point. Yeah, I mean, American sports, I think, is probably even worse in terms of its sort of superficial commercial nature. So I think you might be onto something. I'm just looking up a list here of Taylor Swift's boyfriends, and she did date Harry Styles.
Oh, right, okay.
Also Tom Hiddleston. I didn't know that one.
Not Tom Huddleston.
No, that well, if she dated Tom Huddleston, then that would have been for life.
Yeah.
We've also got Calvin Harris,
Oh
Joe
my
Jonas. Don't know some of them. Matty Healy, I know him.
Oh, from 1975.
John Mayer, Corey Monteith. Oh, he's dead. Oh God. I wonder then if you could go back to her other exes and see if there's some kind of commercial or political reason for having dated those people as well.
Being the cynic that I am, yeah, I feel like at this point it just kind of suits the brand, doesn't it?
What else did her previous boyfriends cover up?
So this is why I brought this to you. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So stay tuned, folks, when next time we do a whole deep dive into Taylor Swift's romantic history. No, absolutely not. We will not be doing that.
I'm gonna type in Taylor Swift jet and just see what we get. I mean, there's still a few things mentioning the private jet, but then there's ones about the Jets game. Something about Elon Musk as well. He's always there knocking around. We're concluding pretty much the premiere, the resurrection, as it were. What this represents is Jeremiad for a new age. I'm sure if the prophet Jeremiah had access to this technology, would he not have used a podcast to spread the word of God? Would he not? He would have. He would have been on X, he would have been on Facebook, he would have been, doomsaying across all platforms. And that's what we're kind of doing there. This is Jeremiad for the digital age.
Preach.
Here.
So what can the people expect if they tune in next time, Tom?
Probably a bit more focus. Throughout the sort of series, we'll be looking to pick a subject, dissect a subject, and just really go to town on it in that way. Just complain about it, bitterly lament it. Because society is not just one thing. There's so many aspects. We'll look at, sports, social media, politics, Taylor Swift,
language. There's no stone that's safe.
Exactly. We will dig to the deepest trenches of society's secrets, and we're going to expose some things. So, get ready to have your eyes pulled far open and to see things and to hear things, because you're going to change.
You might even need a helmet.